Hi, guys. Welcome to the TIP podcast. It stands for Transformative Ideas in People podcast. And today we'll be talking about digital oil fields with none other than Geoffrey Cann, who is a digital innovation expert for oil and gas. He's an author, he's a speaker. He has a podcast called Digital Oil and Gas, which you can find on YouTube, Spotify, all the platforms. Uh, Before he did all of this, he was with Deloitte 24 years. He was a leader in digital oil and gas. That's how I know him. I met him in Calgary. I'm a petroleum engineer myself, and this topic deeply interests me. So here we go. How's it going, Geoffrey?
It's all good. Life is good.
Nice, nice. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do these days on your
Sure.
podcast?
My work these days, I spend much of my time as a professional speaker. So I'm invited by organizations, trade shows, conferences, boards of directors, management teams to deliver talks on digital innovations in the oil and gas industry, upstream, midstream, downstream, service companies, onshore, offshore, oil sands, conventional, unconventional, global and international, domestic North America. That's what I try to do is blow away the mystery, the ambiguity and the uncertainty at the intersection of the digital industry on the one side and the oil and gas industry on the other. And that creates and there's lots of conversation to happen in there to help organizations figure out where and how they should be deploying these tools into their business. So that's where I spend my time.
Okay, that's really cool. How many events have you spoken at so far? How many?
Oh
How many?
gosh, I've lost track. Probably hundreds. Um, so it's a lot. And of course, I've been doing this for 5 years,
Mhm.
so it's pretty steady. Between the online, we went online, as you know, during the pandemic, and this sort of the number of face-to-face
Yeah.
presentations obviously vanished. But we went through online. You could actually do 3, 4 events a day. You didn't have to travel. So it turns out the volume went up, not down. So yeah, but
Wow.
lots and lots of events. I've lost track.
Mostly at universities or is it trade shows and stuff like that?
Mix
A mix of.
of organizations where they might want me to speak, say, at a webinar, be the lead
Mhm.
speaker on a webinar, or speak at a conference, online conference, or virtual live conference. Sometimes it's managers who have a small group of professionals, say, in a specific area of the business. Control centers, very common. Control center operators, you
Okay.
can pull them together quite easily. They have a very common and consistent job. They're integral to running a operation. And at the same time, the digital tools can actually make their worlds much easier. So managers at say, a control center will call me up and say, I need to deliver a talk to my people about the world of change and what's happening to
Nice.
help them embrace change.
Nice. So, Geoffrey, I'm going to ask some pertinent questions first, some juicy questions first, things that people are thinking of these days. How is oil and gas changing the environment now? So, first thing I want to know is how
Yeah.
many people is the digital technology replacing engineers, like replacing petroleum engineers? How
I'm
much
not
is it
sure.
replacing?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's replacing petroleum engineers. I think that's probably inaccurate. I think what it is doing is it is making existing engineers far more productive and providing them with more, freeing up some of their capacity from their day-to-day work because these tools are creating taking some of the low-end drudge work off their plates and giving them more capacity. This is actually a positive. It's not a negative. And this actually pattern has repeated itself over time. Every time we come up with an innovation, over time, what we learn is that humans adapt. The freed up capacity from these innovations provides the ability for people to explore areas of their work they couldn't get to in the
Okay.
past. And so it's
Okay.
not a question of the people are being displaced. Now, that said, if you are a low-end engineering professional, say, and you're in an offshore center and your job is draftsman work or doing pretty rudimentary line and piping diagrams, there's a pretty good chance your job has been consumed by these innovations. But for those of us in the developed world, I'm not seeing a displacement effect here yet.
Okay, so let's get to like the experience that I had right after petroleum engineering was with Halliburton, where
Yeah,
I did drilling fluids engineering. I provided drilling fluid services to
sure.
customers on the field. So
Yep.
on the drilling field, let's say, what's happening these days in terms of digital oil field? Like what technology is helping engineers and personnel on the field? Can you explain?
Well, there's lots of innovations happening, and because these technologies are not as expensive as they used to be, the opportunity for service companies, field services to embrace these tools is stronger than ever. And so there's lots and lots of interest in these tools. When you go to legacy wells, like you have to think about the oil and gas world as wells that were drilled prior to these tools and the wells that are being drilled right now. The legacy infrastructure struggles to embrace change for a whole bunch of reasons. Runs 24/7, has a management of change process. When you take a well out of service, it has an immediate and quite significant negative economic effect because you don't have production. So it's at the front line of the industry where you see the level of innovation and change happening. And
Okay.
at the front line, the service companies are under tremendous pressure to continually invest in innovation in order for their services to remain competitive. And so what you'll see is artificial intelligence tools, machine tools, autonomy, remote control, remote supervision, all of that stuff is at the very front of this industry where the latest wells are being produced in the upstream. The latest plants being built, they're going to be very digital. But the legacy facilities, they'll struggle to embrace
Yes,
change.
I see what you mean. Okay, so can you give us an example of how uh, the drilling rigs, let's say, are using digital technology? Like you said, mobility, robotics, digital twin. Like, can you give an example of at least one of these of how it's impacting the drilling field?
Oh, sure. I
Drilling
mean,
rig?
it's just a couple to kind of illustrate. So, a drilling company that's using a drilling services outfit, and the drilling data is being pulled off that drill rig. Its performance, its operating parameters during that. It's being taken back, hauled through to a central control centers where the highly experienced but quite scarce professionals who have drilled hundreds and hundreds of wells in their time are able to stare at the progress of that well delivery and then provide real-time commentary or advice and guidance to the drilling supervisors actually on the ground. That's commonly done now and becoming much something that's quite routine. But that was never available in the past. Second is the use of artificial intelligence tools and machine learning tools to look at drilling operations as they're happening, and then provide real-time corrections and guidance at the rig face, so that the drilling operations can benefit from all of the experience of all of those prior drilling exercises. That's also quite real. A third one. The drilling cuttings, when they come up off of the up onto the table,
Yes.
historically it's very hard for you to look at the sheer volume of that and make sense of it. But there's companies now that have evolved where they use digital tools to take imagery of those cuttings as they're coming up, and take that image data, they send it up to the cloud, they process it through an artificial intelligence engine that looks at those drilling cuttings and then provides very informed analysis for the drilling engineer around what is actually happening at this a super granular level.
Wow.
So that, and this is all using these simple for these days, but digital tools like high definition cameras at the
Okay.
drilling table.
I was gonna say, yeah, what is it cameras? So I guess it's
Cameras, yeah,
cameras then.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Because
And
you can imagine, right? Like,
mm,
well, how we do this in the traditional ways, you'd take that drilling core, those
yeah.
tailings, and you'd send them off to a lab and you'd wait 6 weeks and you get some analysis back. But using high def cameras pointed right at the table, high capacity communications link, 5G network, for example, satellite uplink, a cloud service that can interpret that data on the fly. You take those images and you process them as you're drilling. Suddenly
Mm.
you've got a far more granular view of what it is that you're encountering subsurface, and you can do
Yeah,
it on the fly.
that's necessary because one of the things, like when I was a drilling fluids engineer, I had a lot of apparatus to test the fluid,
Yep,
which was the viscosity, the density, all
yep,
of that, the mud
yep.
cake,
Contaminants,
but
whatever's in it. Yeah,
contaminants, but I wasn't able to measure the porosity of the rock coming up. For
yeah.
that, you need a very sophisticated equipment. In fact, maybe an MRI or CT
Yeah,
scan to
yeah.
find out the porosity. I know one of my professors at Texas Tech actually was part of the invention, and but it's very sophisticated. And if you're saying really high quality cameras can do that instantaneously with their AI software, then that's really cool. That's definitely going to save time.
Well, there's lots of things these are mostly used and because there's many different ways and needs for drilling, mineral drilling, water wells, all kinds of applications. But this the whole idea of being able to interpret the tailings as they come up, it saves huge amounts of time.
Mhm.
And it facilitates the exercise, the analysis work that would otherwise take weeks and weeks to accomplish. And this stuff is happening very, very fast. Like these evolutions are happening very, very quickly. They're not widespread. That's the other challenge with oil and gas. We take a very long time for a single innovation or a single idea to work its way through the whole of the industry. It's decades. And so we can talk about all this as
Yeah.
kind of it's possible, but the reality is when you get out into the field and you want to say, so well, show me this working. Well, it is working, but in these very, very frontier, very out front use cases, the vast majority of our industry continues to drill wells like it did 5 years ago.
Okay. Okay. And how many like service providers are there for such a technology, for this technology specifically? Would you know?
Oh, there's one that I'm aware of, but I've also understood this going back to when I was doing research for my books. There were a handful of companies that were staring at these various problems and trying to figure out how to apply technology to them. But in the main, that for these innovations to get rolled out across the industry, they typically the model that I was able to kind of pull out of the history here
Yeah.
is that the innovative company will develop it, but in order to get it into the hands of a whole lot of companies in oil and gas, which is, as you know, very risk averse, very cautious industry, doesn't embrace change too quickly. You
True.
really want to get that technology into the hands of a company with the breadth and the horsepower to roll it out across a large geography. So it ends up in the hands of the Halliburtons and the Schlumbergers of the world. That's the commercialization pathway to get to scale.
Okay.
So yeah, not surprisingly, those companies, the engineering firms will have scouts that are out monitoring the environment to see where the innovations are happening, which ones are working, which ones make sense, and then they're buying them and pulling them into their portfolio, and then use the muscle of their sales arm and their distribution arm to get the technologies as spread out as they can.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I wanted, now that you said Halliburton Schlumberger, I just remembered
SLB now, of course. They changed their
SLB. Well,
brand.
that's what it goes with the
Yeah,
brand. But
yeah.
Schlumberger, I knew someone that interviewed with them like 15, 20 years ago, and
Uh,
they went to their headquarters, and their headquarters had a lot of like they showcased a lot of aerospace technology, and a lot of advanced technologies even back then. So like
Yep.
Schlumberger invests a lot into that, and that
Yeah.
was 15, 20 years ago. So now they must be using even more advanced technology.
Yeah,
So
I know with the engineering firms, one of the things that they do, which is really innovative, is that let's say you're a Worley or a Wood or some other Bechtel serving the industry,
yeah.
you'll develop some sort of innovation with a client, solve a quite specific problem, and at the end of that you've developed some IP, and sometimes that IP belongs to the customer that purchase that help you develop it. But in many
Right.
instances, that IP can be brought back into the mothership and then turned into a commercial offering that's much more widespread. Many of the big EPC firms have this kind of model now in place where they're constantly looking for stuff going on at the edge of their business, which has far bigger and great expansion potential. And then
Mhm.
they bring that inside and then turn it into a innovation that they can then commercialize.
Okay. Okay. Is there any of these companies using like aerospace technologies or satellites uh, for oil and gas? Is there any of that?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of cross-pollination, cross-cutting technologies that goes from one sector over to another. In fact, there are conferences now dedicated to trying to find these pathways where an innovation, say, in agri-tech, fintech, or energy, resources industry, military is another good one.
Mhm.
These technologies can move from one to the other.
Can
A
you
good
give us an
example.
example? Can you
Yeah,
give us an
sure.
example? Yeah.
Yeah. An example would be, say, an offshore platform in East Coast Canada will develop or have need for a technology that helps them predict the movements of icebergs in the area, because the icebergs are sensitive to wind and tide, their composition of the iceberg itself, its size and its shape, the time
Mm.
of year. And icebergs very bad news. The
Yeah.
Titanic went down because of an
Yeah.
encounter with an iceberg. So you bring an
Yeah.
iceberg into contact with your offshore platform, big problem. So the technology or developments that, say, help model out
Mhm.
iceberg activity can be very handy to shipping and logistics, to the military who are doing, say, offshore patrols. And so that this technology can, if you knew about it, you could migrate it into other sectors and leverage it that way. So that's one example. Another one,
Wow.
if you go into the high Arctic, you'll find resource companies trying to explore for minerals. You'll find the military trying to protect northern borders, and you'll find power and energy companies trying to provide power to northern communities. You'll find northern communities up there trying to stay well fed. And this creates all of these different industries are trying to solve quite similar problems at the same time. And there is tremendous opportunity to figure out, how do you take, say, a solution to deliver site energy for a drilling company or a mining company,
Yeah.
and use that same technology to deliver energy for a northern community, or energy for a military installation, or
Wow.
energy for an airport up in the north. So there's lots of opportunity for cross-cutting pollination that way.
Yeah. Wow, that's really cool. I really like that how they're using technology to see how ice is moving.
Yeah,
Um, and
icebergs.
yeah, icebergs and just even ice. Actually, um, I've never been offshore, but my dad has used to work offshore out in Russia many, many years ago. And I've seen pictures of how the ocean around the rigs he would work at were just frozen. Like you'd see just frozen waves.
Oh yeah,
And he had to wear like this, it almost looked like a spacesuit, but
yeah,
it weighed like 10 or 15 kilograms of just like, warm clothes for like negative 70 degrees Celsius. And you could only be outside for
yeah,
2 minutes.
yeah.
So that's how cold it is. So I would think that technology is very important. But how does that technology work? Like, is it like the same technology used for tectonic plates? Because it's kind of like tectonic plates moving, but on water. Like, do you
I'm
have
not
any
sure.
idea?
You'd have to talk to the the teams of people that are working to solve these problems for the offshore to get into the nuts and bolts of it. But I do know that this is a good example of for this to work, you need computing horsepower to be able to do the modeling. And for that to work, you need cloud computing, and you need telecommunications so you can move data back and forth. And you need sensor technology, satellites or other, where you can actually get eyes on so that you can see the ice moving. All of that only works because we have this collection of individual components of digital technology, sensors, telecommunications, cloud computing, where these solutions suddenly can be brought to life. That's the real thing that's going on here is we're now at the stage where these building blocks can be bolted together in new and creative ways to do things we never could have done in the past.
Yeah, that's really cool. So have you you've had how many guests have you had on your podcast so far with expertise in
Oh,
digital oil and gas?
I don't really keep track of the number of guests. I know the number of episodes, and it's 350. There's probably 150 to 200 guests have come on.
Okay,
It splits between I divide up into the buy side and sell side. So buy side is people who would buy innovation, and
right.
that's typically an oil company. And then sell side is companies that obviously they're selling technology into oil and gas somewhere in the industry. It tends to skew to sell side. And I think that's because on the buy side, oil companies, for a variety of reasons, they keep a relatively low profile, so they don't go out too far out into the public eye these days. So it tends to skew to sell side, but there's a handful of individuals buy side who come on podcasts to talk about what's going on in the industry.
I see what you mean. Yeah. So there hasn't been someone, a guest that talked about these icebergs moving, that technology. No, no one from that
Not
yet.
yet.
Okay,
Nope,
not
not
yet.
yet. Nope.
Okay.
I've had
And-
lots of guests on dealing with like artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence tools for and generative AI, which has been really newsworthy now for about 14 months. There's been lots of individuals who've come on to talk about that.
Okay. So
Yeah.
let's talk about like the most interesting piece of information you've gotten from the AI guests on your podcast. Can you give us something very interesting from there?
Well, the use case, I think, which literally every single oil company could just go and grab tomorrow for almost, with very little effort, is to take the repository of legacy engineering content. That's going to be drawings and briefing documents, business case analysis, assessments and reviews, safety, anything that engineering professionals have developed over the years. These documents all exist in oil companies. They're going to be filed Word documents and Excel spreadsheets and email logs, and they're going to be tucked away in various folders and files. Then there will be the engineering systems themselves, CAD drawings, plus your operations and maintenance services. But the best use case, you take all of that collection of content,
Okay.
which might be 40 years worth of documents. You
Right.
load that up into your own private model, so Chat GPT for your company. And now you can query that 40-year history of engineering content.
Right.
In the same way you ask ChatGPT today, what's the best way? What's the world-class? In fact, I did this yesterday. I was putting a podcast together, and I went to ChatGPT, and my instructions were: you are a world-class YouTube descriptions editor. That's your job. Your
Okay.
job, and I want you to give me the world-class table of contents for the best-in-class descriptions that you would ever see on any YouTube publication, YouTube video.
Yeah.
And boom, instantly you've got that. Imagine if you could ask that engineering question. I need the best-in-class management of change process for this particular valve on that particular unit, going into our repository of engineering content. Tell me everything you know about that particular valve. And then instantly you'd have
Yeah.
its installed date, its warranty position, last time it was inspected, any faults and mishaps you've experienced with it, last time it was upgraded and replaced, who last touched it, when was it the subject of a significant incident, if ever. Imagine getting all of that like instantly.
Yeah. Yeah. Big data is where it's at. Like
Oh
big
yeah.
data, that's what it is. It's big data and providing that data to you in an efficient manner.
Yeah,
So,
huge. I saw this. I wrote
mhm,
about this in my first book. Woodside Energy did this Australian company. The Northwest Shelf Project is a big LNG export business in
right.
Australia, 16 million tons a year, I think. So it's pretty world class, big facility. Been running now for 40 years. And in all that time, they'd accumulated all of these different engineering studies.
Yeah.
And they were on stage, and they said they were spending 40 to 60% of total engineering time, right? As guys like you
Yeah.
at the Northwest, 40 to 60% of their time was spent researching these old engineering studies to get the answer to some question that was bugging them that day. And so they loaded the whole thing into, at the time, a product called Watson from IBM, and then
Yeah.
they could ask and get instant answers to these various questions.
Wow.
40% of engineering time,
Yeah.
like freed up.
Talking about time, it just reminds me of another technology that I discovered. It's very basic,
Yeah.
but I forgot, it's an app, kind of like Google Maps, but it's just for rigs. It shows you where the rigs are and gives you
Oh
rig
yeah.
directions. And I thought that's really important because when I worked for Halliburton, I had to drive the pickup truck that they gave me to those rigs,
Yep.
and it was like in a 200-mile radius from Midland,
Yeah.
sometimes all the way in like New Mexico. I'm driving at night at like
Yeah.
2 a.m. to a rig. And I remember one time, like my boss had told me, "Hey, you're gonna drive to this point after this gas station. You're gonna see a pole. You take a left after that pole, and then
Yeah.
you're gonna see a big rock. Then up the hill, then you'll take a right." And oh my gosh, it was 2 a.m. in the winter. It was
Yeah.
like negative 30 degrees. I'd lost um, the signal on both my phones. I was like really scared. And then I saw like a light shining, came from the rig. Somehow I just saw
Yeah.
the light shining and I
Yeah.
followed the light and I got there, but I was like freaking out and, I lost so much time. And had I had this technology that this new company came up with, I forget the name, then it would just,
Take you to
just
the
tell
rig
me, it would just tell me where the rig is. I would have saved hours of time and headaches and,
and risk.
and
Risk.
risk. Main
Yeah.
thing is risk. So I feel like, yeah, the technology is going to save time, which is going to save money, and it's
Yeah.
going to make things a lot safer. So,
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of money, though, like, the most popular technology, I guess, the most important one would be the big data technology that you're saying. How much would it cost a company to invest into that? Invest in something like that?
Well, they already have invested in it. They just don't know it.
Okay,
Oh, yeah. People all over. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, just recognize people all over your company are using ChatGPT today,
right,
right? You don't
right.
know. They're dumping that data into ChatGPT and getting an answer. And so they're already using it, and it's costing them it's in many cases ChatGPT is just free, the early versions of it. The newer versions, ChatGPT 4, of course, is a modest amount, $10 a month or something, super
Yeah,
cheap. Your companies all across your company, people are using this tool already. It's already here.
it's already
So
here. Okay.
it's not a question of how much it's going to cost me to get into it. You're in it, like whether you know it or not. I don't
Yeah,
know. Anybody who's putting their own year-end review together by hand now, they're not going to ChatGPT and saying, "Hey, write me a really good year-end review. Here's the data I want you to use." Right? That's happening now. So we're in it now. If you want to do it well,
yeah,
and take full advantage of it, then there is it's a classic oil and gas challenge of creating a project and getting the scope right, knowing very clearly what problem you want to solve,
Yep.
And then getting the team assembled, giving it its marching orders and the right metrics, and getting it on its way. You got to resource it correctly, and you got to put time and people and dollars behind it. You got to measure it properly, and you got to give it clarity of direction. So if you don't have those four things, that's just classic project management. You're not going to be successful. But I know that in the case of to do a field trial of one of these technologies, like in a really small scale, check it out, see how she works. Budgets that are sub 100K are not out of the question to do a good little test. But the minute you want to scale these things up, that's when real money has to be put forward.
Okay. Well, we have 3 minutes left, Geoffrey. Last question is, if you had 30 seconds to tell the entire oil and gas industry, what would you say in those 30 seconds to them? Something they need to know that's important, what's coming up and what's happening now.
What's 30 seconds? Oh, that's a tall order. I would say the next generation of young people who would be working in our industry have grown up with one of these in their hands. They know no other existence. So if your business model, for whatever reason, you say to your workers, we're going to put this at the door. Don't take this on site. We're not going to provide you with this capability. Just remember, every single young person coming into the industry today grew up with one of these. They know no other world. And if you want to get them to stay, you're going to have to embrace that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, that's good. I know last time you said that they're able to use phones on the rig, which is a huge difference from what it was from the past.
Yeah.
But that's amazing. Well, Geoffrey, thank you so much for your time. I got just a minute remaining here. Where can people go to view your podcast?
So podcast is on iTunes and Google and Amazon. It's called Digital Innovations in Oil and Gas with Geoffrey Cann. And if you type in digital innovations in oil and gas, you'll get there pretty quickly. There's on my YouTube channel, just look for me, Geoffrey Cann. You can find me, and the video playlist will have the podcasts as well, including a new video versions of them. So that's if you're looking for that. I also write a weekly article about digital innovation in oil and gas.
Nice.
It's called Digital Oil Gas, and it's on Substack. So you just go to the Substack website and type in digital oil and gas, and it'll pop up. You'll be able to find it.
Wonderful. I'm going to check it all out. Thank you so much for your time again, Geoffrey. That was really awesome. It'd be great to do it again. Thank you guys for watching this podcast. Hope you learned a lot from it. This will be posted on YouTube, LinkedIn, all the platforms. All the details will be in the description for Geoffrey, for myself. So thanks again, guys, and have a good one.